Have you ever seen something play out on live television and felt deep in your belly that you were watching an instant, everybody will remember moment? That's exactly what went down when Meghan Markle stepped onto the set of The View, poised and ready to discuss purpose. But what she entered was so much more than an interview. It was a slow-burning tempest, a battle that peeled back every carefully placed curtain to reveal tension, resentment, and the raw human desire to be heard, understood, and defended from the very first question. The air was electric, every exchange cutting deeper, until it became obvious this wasn't a discussion. This was a war of wills where respect, pride, and reputation hung in the balance. And whether you're Team Meghan or Team the hosts, what transpired that day resonated in all of us because it wasn't about royalty or titles or headlines. It was about what occurs when a woman attempts to claim her truth in a room that won't allow her. What happens when Meghan Markle steps onto the set of The View and the air instantly crackles with tension? Let's just say you're in for one of the most unforgettable moments in show history. The Duchess of Sussex didn't sit down for an interview. She entered a storm. But before we get to the fireworks, go ahead and click that subscribe button and leave a comment below. Believe me, you'll want in on this conversation. So last night's episode of The View, it kept people discussing from coast to coast. Who was the special guest? None other than Meghan Markle herself. Now, be you a fan or not, you've heard something or other about Meghan's reputation. Strong convictions, confident demeanor, and a propensity for generating headlines wherever she goes. And with Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and Sunny Hostin across from her, you just knew things were going to get interesting. The moment Meghan took the stage, tension in the room was palpable. It was thick. Something was about to happen. What was to be a regular interview rapidly became something much more charged. The program started in classic View style, applause from the audience, some banter between the hosts, and Meghan emerging looking stylish in a crisp, fitted blazer. Her smile was glossy, making sure, but a spark of wariness returned in her glance. She knew this would not be a warm and fuzzy interview. Whoopi, at the head of the table, nodded to Meghan with a smile, but her eyes flashed sharp, almost like a boxer assessing her opponent before the bell rings. Joy leaned forward with that same signature smirk, drumming her pen on the table, clearly eager to land the first punch. Sunny, unflappable, and serene, pushed back her glasses, looking the epitome of attorney prepared to grill a witness. The other two hosts lounged back, clearly silent for the moment, but definitely caught up and waiting to strike when the time seemed right. The producers had planned a light segment to begin, talking with Meghan about her new projects, life in California, and how she's adapted to life after royal status. But let's be real, the hosts had other plans. Whoopi jumped into it, her voice low but unmistakably biting. "Meghan, you've been getting a lot of attention lately," she declared. "Some folks say you're pursuing fame. Some folks think you're just telling the truth. So what's the story?" It was a question, it was a challenge, and you could feel the audience change in their seats, sensing the not-so-subtle tension. But Meghan didn't blink. She tilted her head slightly, her smile tightening just a touch. "I'm focused on building something that matters," she said, her voice steady, though there was a spark beneath the calm. "I'm not chasing fame. I'm creating opportunity. That's a big difference." That earned her a round of applause, but Joy wasn't ready to let it go. She leaned in, her voice becoming cutting. "Opportunity," she repeated. "Some might say you're capitalizing on your royal status while maintaining distance from the royal family. That's a nice, convenient move, don't you think?" And like that, the atmosphere in the room changed once more. The air became thick, the tension more charged. Meghan's jaw clenched slightly, but she remained composed. "I'm not here to rehash old stories," Meghan said firmly, her tone sharp but calm. "I'm here to talk about what I'm doing right now, empowering women, lifting up unheard voices, and creating content that matters." Sunny raised an eyebrow, her expression cool and analytical. When she spoke, her voice sliced through the air like a scalpel. "Come on, Meghan, your brand thrives on controversy. Every move you make appears designed to keep you in the headlines. Is that truly empowerment, or just really great PR?" You could sense the shock in the room. The crowd gasped, their eyes shifting between the two women. Meghan's face set in a tighter expression, slightly, before she leaned forward, hands folded tightly on the table. With all due respect, Sonny, Meghan began, her voice controlled but laced with frustration. I think it's unfair to reduce what I've built to a PR campaign. I've spent years trying to build something real. I'm not going to apologize for being visible. The message was calm, but the emotion underneath it was hard to miss. Then Whoopi spoke up again, folding her arms with a half laugh that wasn't exactly friendly. Authentic? That's a big word, Meghan, she said, her tone biting. Some might say you're more about headlines than heart. The audience responded with a wave of murmurs and mixed reactions. Some clapped, some mumbled in disapproval. Meghan's polished smile wavered for just a second, but she quickly found her footing again. I'm not shocked you'd remark that, Whoopi, she said, even and concise. Individuals will tend to break down what they do not comprehend. But my work, it tells all. The remark was low-key, but it hit home. You could read the flash in Whoopi's eyes as she leaned in, voice elevating. Oh, we get plenty, she snapped. We get someone who walks out on responsibility and then acts like the victim when the world doesn't give them a standing ovation. That stung. The crowd went wild again. Some people clapping, some gasping. There was excitement in the air now. Joy chimed in, her tone biting and confrontational. Let's discuss that duty, Meghan. You quit the royal family. Fine. Your prerogative. But then you get on stages all over the globe, dishing out family gossip, still adding your Duchess title to your name. You can't have it both ways. The accusation hung in the air like a cloud, and for a moment Meghan's calm exterior cracked. A flicker of anger crossed her face, barely but just enough for the cameras to catch. I'm not here to defend my life choices to you, Joy, she snapped back. I'm here to talk about my current work, not to be interrogated about my past. Sonny smiled faintly, sensing the shift in power, and leaned in with a tone that suggested she was going for the jugular. But your past is your brand, Meghan, she said. You've made a career out of being the outsider, the rebel, the truth teller. But let me ask, is it the truth, or is it just your version of it? The crowd was now in suspense, hanging between applause and groans of disapproval. It was a moment that had everyone leaning forward. Meghan pressed her lips together in a thin line, took a deep breath to steady herself, and answered in firm quietness. My truth is my truth, Sonny. I don't need your sanction to authenticate my truth, Meghan answered softly but firmly. The room sizzled with tension, the kind of moment that has you leaning in, eyes fixed on the screen, knowing something larger is coming. But Whoopi wasn't going to give Meghan the final word. She leaned forward, her voice clipped and heavy with judgment. You're always going on about truth, she told him. But what about accountability? You've got a lot to say about everyone else, Meghan. But when it's your turn to own up, you duck. That is not truth. That is convenience. The audience blew up. Cheers, gasps, the entire room suddenly electric. Meghan's face darkened a shade. Her hands clasped the tabletop, knuckles white. This was meant to be the wrap for the segment, a brief cut to commercial to diffuse the growing heat. But it was obvious the hosts weren't finished. Joy Behar leaned forward once more, voice dripping with sarcasm. Hey, Meghan, she told her, for a woman who claims she's all about empowerment, you spend a lot of time being the victim. Why don't you just own your decisions rather than blaming everyone else? Now the whole room was tense. You could sense it, the pressure of the moment building. Meghan gazed from host to host, her face impassive. When she did speak, her tone was soft, but cut like a blade. I own every decision I've made, she said. Can you do the same, Joy? Or are you here simply to take my words out of context for the clicks? That one hit. The crowd let out a collective gasp, and all eyes turned to Whoopi, whose face had hardened into a glare. She pointed at Meghan, her voice booming through the studio. Don't come on my show and try to flip the script, Meghan. You're not the only one with a voice here. Now the energy was absolute chaos. You could sense it humming, like the entire room was electric. But Meghan wasn't intimidated. She sat up straight, her voice rising to challenge the moment. I'm not flipping anything, Whoopi, she shot back. I'm simply asking for a genuine conversation. not a witch hunt. By this time, the collision was inevitable. And when at last the show cut away to commercial, the camera caught one last shot. Meghan sitting rigidly, her eyes fixed on Whoopi, eyes burning with fire. Whoopi glared back, unwavering. The rest of the panel glanced at each other, everyone well aware that a nerve had been struck, and nobody was going to let it pass. So what would the hosts do when the show returned? From break, would Meghan hold firm, or would the host push her to the limit? One thing was certain, this storm was just getting started. As the commercial break rolled by and the cameras pulled back in, the tension on the View was thick, humming like the air preceding a thunderstorm. Meghan Markle sat up straight, every inch of her tense body. Her hands were clutched tightly on the table in front of her, staring somewhere just past Whoopi Goldberg, who now sat back in her seat, her face unreadable, but not. Joy Behar had not lost that self-satisfied little smile. Her fingers drummed a beat on the table, as if prepared for round two. Sunny Hostin, calm and collected, smoothed out her notes and surveyed the panel like a chess player studying the board. The two less vocal panelists remained silent, but their gaze was fixed on the exchange, tuned in fully. The whole stage felt like a powder keg. And the fuse? Already burning fast. Whoopi broke the silence with a voice as calm as it was dangerous. "Welcome back to The View," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "We're here with Meghan Markle, and let's just say things are getting real." The audience laughed nervously, feeling that what was about to happen wouldn't be pretty. The tension was palpable now. You could practically hear it buzzing in the air. Whoopi looked at Meghan, her eyes narrowed with intent. "Prior to the break, you stated that you wished for a balanced discussion," she said slowly. "Let us have one then. Why is it that you believe others criticize you for attempting to be both things simultaneously, the royal and the rebel?" Meghan's lips curled up just a tiny bit, a flash of annoyance crossing her face before she took a deep breath and recomposed herself. "I'm not playing both sides, Whoopi," she said, her voice calm but tight. "I'm living my life, building a legacy. If people want to twist that into some story about me being a hypocrite, that's on them, not me." There was a soft murmur from the crowd. Some clapped, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Joy let out a dry snort and leaned forward, clearly ready to pounce. "Your legacy, Meghan?" she scoffed. "You're out here selling jam and streaming deals while still riding that Duchess title. That's not legacy. That's a hustle." The audience gasped audibly, the room crackling again. Meghan's eyes flared, her temper rising just below the surface. "Joy, you're intentionally distorting what I'm doing," she snapped back, her tone louder now, laced with anger. "My work is about influence, about philanthropy, about narrative, about raising people up. I don't have to explain that to you or anyone else." Before the room had a chance to settle again, Sunny intervened, her tone sharp and lawyerly, each word guarded. "But you're still not answering the core question, Meghan," she said. "You say you're independent, but you're still profiting off the royal brand. That's what people take issue with. Why not just drop the title? Stand on your own?" The audience roared. Some cheered in agreement, others booed in protest. Meghan's jaw tensed. She leaned forward, her voice low but cutting. "Sonny, I worked for that title," she told her. "Through marriage, through service, through sacrifice. I'm not relinquishing it just because it doesn't meet your definition of what's acceptable." Her words lingered in the air, thick with quiet rebellion. But Whoopi wasn't finished. "Sacrifice?" she sneered, her voice growing louder. "You abandoned a family, a country, and an obligation. And now you call that sacrifice? Please, Meghan, you're not deceiving anyone." The audience erupted once more, cheers and boos flying in all directions. Meghan's restraint finally broke down. Her hands came down on the table. Not hard, but hard enough to make her point. "I'm not crying over anything, Whoopi," she snapped. "I left a toxic environment to keep my family safe. And you don't get to judge that from your seat." The audience was divided now, some standing up in support of Meghan's refusal, others calling out for Whoopi. Then Joy leaned in again, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Protect your family or protect your brand? Because from where we're sitting, every interview, every podcast, every book, It all looks pretty calculated, like you're keeping the drama alive on purpose. Meghan's eyes burned as she turned to Joy, her voice trembling slightly but still fierce. "You're blaming me for creating drama," she exclaimed, visibly upset. "Take a look around, Joy. You're the ones making this a sideshow, interpreting every statement I make to serve your purpose." Sunny, unruffled as ever, allowed a tiny smirk. "Agenda?" she said. "We're just asking questions, Meghan, and if you can't stand having tough questions asked, perhaps you're not as prepared for this platform as you believe." That one hit home. Meghan's cheeks flushed, her breathing quick, but she didn't back off. "I'm more than ready, Sunny," she fired back. "But I didn't come here to be your punching bag so you can increase your ratings." The studio buzzed now, every viewer on tenterhooks, holding their breath for round two. And then Whoopi leaned in one last time, her voice icy but piercing. "Oh, you're ready, all right," she said. "Ready to dodge accountability." As the tension built, Whoopi delivered the line that stunned the room cold. "You walk around like you're some symbol of truth," she said sharply. "But you're selfish, Meghan, and you've been riding that act for far too long." The crowd froze. Audible gasps filled the air, followed immediately by a wave of chaos. Cheers, boos, shocked shouts. It all hit at once. Meghan was silent for a moment, frozen. Her eyes went wide at the raw abruptness of the attack, her hands shaking faintly as she laid them on the table. "Excuse me," she repeated, low and heavy with incredulity. "Did you just call me selfish? On national television?" Whoopi did not blink. She looked straight ahead, unmoved. "I said what I said," she answered bluntly. "You come on here thinking you're better than everybody else. But you're not. You're playing a game, and we're not afraid to say so." The audience was on its feet by this time. The studio was abuzz with frantic energy, all eyes fixed on the blazing confrontation. Meghan's breath hitched in her throat, but she moved forward, her own glare meeting Whoopi's. "You don't speak to me like that, Whoopi," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I came here in good faith, and you're making this into a personal attack." Joy gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Good faith?" she laughed. "Come on, Meghan. You knew full well what this was when you entered. Don't pretend to be surprised now." Meghan's gaze flicked between the women across from her. Her chest heaved up and down, her calm disintegrating by the second. "This isn't a discussion," she spat, her voice breaking with anger. "It's an ambush. You're not interested in hearing what I have to say. You just want to destroy me." Sunny leaned forward just a little bit, her voice controlled but glacial. "If this is an ambush, perhaps it's because you're not accustomed to being challenged," she added. "You're accustomed to managing your own narrative. But this is real talk." The audience responded in an instant. Some applauded, others yelled. But Meghan shook her head, tears erupting. "Real talk?" she retorted. "Number this. This is a lynching, and you know it." The name fell like a stone among the audience. Quiet descended. Even the audience, so noisy just minutes earlier, fell silent. Whoopi's face pinched, her tone suddenly low and menacing. "Don't you think you can toss that word about, Meghan?" she snarled. "You don't get to play that card here." The crowd erupted again, some in support, some clearly uneasy. It was a moment too close to avoid, but Meghan didn't back away. Her voice trembled with conviction as she locked eyes with Whoopi. "I'm calling it what it is," she said. "You're ganging up on me. You're twisting my words, insulting me. On live television. That's not a discussion. That's a takedown." Joy rolled her eyes, cutting in again with biting sarcasm. "Oh, please, Meghan, don't play the victim. You came on this show prepared to go head-to-head, and now you're whining about us fighting back?" Meghan trembled as she shook her finger at Joy, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm not crying about something, Joy. I'm accusing you of hypocrisy. You sit there talking about fairness, and all you're doing is bullying me. For headlines." The crowd was a tangled mess of noise at this point. Applause, boos, gasps, all churning in a tidal wave of emotional turmoil. You could almost sense the air growing thick with tension. Then Whoopi leaned in again, her voice gruff and filling with rage. "You want to discuss bullying?" she snarled. "Watch how you've pulled your own family through the muck. You don't lecture us on fairness." The crowd roared in response, and Meghan's face visibly paled. Her eyes brimmed with tears she hadn't yet allowed to fall. "You don't know my story, Whoopi. she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. You don't know what I've been through. Sonny, unmoved, glanced at her with a cold smirk. We know enough, Meghan. And the world knew it too. The clash had reached a boiling point. The host wouldn't let up, and Meghan was visibly at her breaking point. Each deliberate twitch, each piercing glare, each shake in her voice, filmed, amplified, irreplaceable. The viewers were transfixed in their seats, acutely aware they were watching television history, something uncooked, unedited, and incendiary. But all the viewers at home and all the viewers in the studio could feel it. Meghan's breaking point was imminent. The entire segment hung in the balance, the set charged with tension, as if one false word would push everything off the cliff. The atmosphere was charged. Studio lights shone down like a single spotlight in an interrogation chamber. The view's stage glowed with heat, not only from the lights, but from the raw, emotional tension mounting minute by minute. Meghan Markle sat there in the middle of it all, her jaw set, her face rigid, and her hands clenched so tightly around the table that her knuckles had turned white. Whoopi Goldberg glared at her head-on, her expression impossible to read, but bristling with icy contempt. And Joy Behar sat with a smirk so razor-sharp it was like a knife, teasing Meghan, challenging her to strike back. Sunny Hostin, cool and deliberate, scribbled something on her pad, occasionally glancing up like an attorney studying for her ultimate cross-examination. The rest of the panelists, quieter but just as intense, leaned in, their silence contributing to the seriousness of the moment. Then Whoopi shattered it, her tone low, firm, and cutting like a knife. You say we don't know your story, Meghan, she started, but we know enough. You've made a career out of pointing fingers. But when the spotlight is on you, you break down? Why should anyone think you're anything other than a deliberate opportunist? The studio exploded. Gasps, scattered applause, voices crying out in shock. The sound swelled like a breaking wave. Meghan's eyes grew tight with anger. She leaned forward, her voice shaking but intense. You want to discuss opportunists, Whoopi? She snapped. Look at this show. You feed on destroying people and labeling it real talk. You're not journalists, you're vultures. That insult was a punch in the gut. The audience erupted into cheers and boos, with some applauding Meghan's fearlessness and others vociferously defending the hosts. Joy's laugh cut through the din. Vultures, she said with a sneer. Oh, that's rich. You've been feeding off the bones of the royal family for years, and now you're angry that someone's calling you out? Give me a break. Meghan's face darkened to deep red. Her voice grew louder, almost a shout now. I'm not angry, Joy. I'm finished. Finished with you manipulating my words. Finished with your phony concern. You don't want a discussion. You want a sideshow. Sunny didn't flinch. Her voice returned cool and calculated. A spectacle? Meghan, you've made your whole brand about drama. All the interviews, all the podcasts, all the projects, it's all designed to keep you in the headlines. Don't sit here and pretend like you're better than any of this. The crowd was electric, full of noise, supporters and detractors alike putting their energy into the moment. Meghan shook her head, her voice trembling with rage. Wrong, Sonny, she snapped. I'm not seeking relevance. I'm here to make a difference. But you wouldn't understand that. You're too busy playing judge and jury. And then the sound of a loud bang. Whoopi slammed her hand on the table. The bang was like a warning shot echoing through the studio. Enough with the martyr routine, Meghan, she bellowed, her voice shaking with rage. You show up here pretending you're an icon of truth, but all you do is sidestep accountability. You don't lecture us when, wherever you go, you have a trail of mayhem behind you. The crowd erupted again. Cheers, cries, indignation, and applause knotted into one deafening response. Meghan's breath caught in her chest. Her eyes widened, a mix of shock and rage flooding her face. The battle had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. You're crossing a line, Whoopi, Meghan said, her voice low and laced with quiet fury. You don't get to call me that and expect me to sit here and take it. The crowd was on its feet once more, the tension in the studio now completely unleashed, heavy and suffocating. Joy crept forward, her tone as biting as a knife. Then don't sit here, Meghan, she spat, her tone dripping with contempt. If you can't handle the heat, Leave the kitchen. The audience went wild, some chanting to keep Meghan, others yelling for the hosts. The silence was just as deafening. Meghan's gaze swept from one face to another, her chest heaving and falling, but she didn't back down, even though her voice shook with tears. "You think I'm afraid of you?" she shot back. "I've dealt with worse than you, Joy, but I won't sit here and be disrespected." Sunny, still composed and cold, let out a soft smirk. "Disrespected?" she repeated. "Meghan, you've disrespected an entire institution, your family, and now you're playing the victim because we're calling it out? That's not how this works." Meghan's hands trembled as she pointed at Sunny, her voice breaking under the weight of frustration. "Don't know what I've been through, Sunny," she said. "Don't know half of it. But you sit there, thinking you know it all. You don't." Whoopi leaned forward once more, her voice low and menacing. "We know enough, Meghan," she snarled. "We know you've got a talent for playing the victim, cashing in on the drama while doing it. You're not fooling anyone anymore." The studio was in an uproar. The crowd was a storm, cheering, shouting, gasping. Tension was almost at breaking point. Meghan had paled, her eyes glazed with unshed tears. But her voice, when she had spoken, was unshakable. "You're mistaken about me, Whoopi," she said, her voice unwavering, "and I won't sit here and have you lie about who I am." There was a hush that fell over the room. She pulled back her chair slowly, the scratch of metal legs scraping across the studio floor, cutting through the stillness like a blade. She stood upright. "I'm here to discuss my work, my vision," she said, "but you've indicated you don't care about any of that. You want a battle. You want blood, and I'm not providing it for you." The room gasped. Some cried out for her to remain. Others applauded the panel's ferocious grilling. Whoopi folded her arms, her voice icy and unyielding. "If you can't take a real conversation, Meghan," she told her, "perhaps you're not as strong as you believe." The Duchess paused stiffly for a moment, her gaze fixed on Whoopi. "I'm stronger than you'll ever know," she whispered, her voice firm even as her hands shook. "But I don't have to prove that to you. I'm done here." She tore off her microphone. The little device dropped onto the table with a clatter. Without further words, she strode away from the stage, heels clicking sharply on the floor. "Run away, Meghan!" Joy shouted after her, her voice taunting. "That's what you do best." The audience reacted again. Some boos, some cheers over her departure. Sunny shook her head in dismay, grumbling under her breath. "Typical." Whoopi leaned back in her seat, her face expressionless, but with a hint of triumph, as if she felt she'd gained something. The camera trailed Meghan as she vanished behind the curtain, her outline engulfed by darkness backstage. And then, silence. The set was in disarray. The hosts remained seated, unyielding, faces a blend of defiance and victory. The audience hummed with dialogue, already dissecting the dramatic emotional confrontation they just witnessed. Whoopi addressed the camera, her tone steady but purposeful. "Well, folks," she said, "that's the view. Real talk, no filter. We'll be right back." The crowd erupted one last time as the show abruptly cut to commercial, an uproar of emotion and disbelief rippling through the studio like an aftershock. Meghan's dramatic walkout wasn't a moment. It was the moment, singed into the brains of everyone who'd seen it, whether from the studio chairs or the comfort of their own couch. The fight was over. But its effects? Those would be felt far longer than the credits rolled. People all over were left with questions, arguments, and a tale that would quite undoubtedly consume headlines for days to come. One thing was definite. This installment of The View would be historic,